Welcome to this webinar of bootstrapping Kubernetes cluster. Cloud computing, let me try to set a theme first of all. Cloud computing, containerizations and container orchestrations. These are really a booming terms in world of IT and DevOps, right? If you are an entry level to an IT field, if you are a developer, if you are a product manager, it is expected that you should know a bit of Docker and Kubernetes as well as cloud computing. That way you can contribute to the projects, you can deploy your projects on this platform and add a value to an organizations, right? So in this particular webinar or in this particular training program, I would walk you through how we can set up a platform for Kubernetes, which is on a cloud platform, which I'm using AWS in this case, by using Terraform, which is an infrastructure as a code. So in this particular webinar, I'm make sure that I should touch base upon Kubernetes, which is a container orchestration platform, a Docker, which is a containerization platform, a cloud computing, and I am using AWS in this case, as well as Terraform, which is a tool for infrastructure automations. There are so many terms which I'm using in this particular webinar, which would be sort of confusing at some extent for a new bees, but please bear with me. I would help you to set up a mental model, a sort of which can be used as a platform to gain understanding of this edge-cutting technologies to all of you. Moving ahead, about me. Hi, I'm Rahul. I do have around 13 years of experience working in IT field. I'm a DevOps and Agile evangelist. I'm certified AWS Solution Architect Professionals. I'm certified Google Associate Engineer. I'm certified Agile Scrum Masters. I do have professional experience of working on infrastructure automations, DevOps automations, DevSecOps since more than 8 years. I'm still working with a big professional like big client in various domains like telecoms. Currently I'm working with a banking client. If I talked about my training expertise, I do have experience of giving a full-fledged trainings to newbies in an IT field, the freshers people, as well as to train the corporate experienced staff in terms of DevOps as well as DevSecOps. So this is a bit of about me. Moving ahead to the next, which is agenda. So the agenda is quite simple. As I said, this is more about how we can bootstrap the Kubernetes clusters. So that Kubernetes cluster is definitely we're gonna build upon AWS, which offer us a free tier account where we can create our steps. And in order to have sort of in order to build the AWS infrastructure component, which will hold our Kubernetes clusters and node, to do that in an automated way, we are going to use Terraform, which is an infrastructure as an code tool. So the first of all, I will go through the term understanding of these three entities like Kubernetes, AWS and Terraform. The second thing is the step walkthrough, how this sort of a cluster can be built. I do have a GitHub source code repository, which is having all the steps that has to be performed. The third thing is the demonstrations, where I will walk you through how we can execute all these steps on your laptops, how we can execute the Terraform steps, which will gonna create the infrastructure on AWS, and on top of that we'll create in Kubernetes clusters and we'll deploy our first Hello World applications on that Kubernetes clusters. And the last but not the least is question and answers. Hope that okay. Moving forward, notions and use cases. So in this particular use case, right, uh, where we are bootstrapping the Kubernetes clusters by ourselves, what actually drive us to have this sort of an own Kubernetes clusters, right? There are so many utilities available in market. For example, KubeOps, KubeADM, which can be used to bootstrap your own clusters. Even there are some sort of an a ready offering by popular cloud provider like EKS, Fargate, right, where you can straightforward use those services and put your application on top of that. But if you go with those ready to use tools in the market, you don't have a sort of a sense, right, how you can build your own Kubernetes clusters, right? Kubernetes is having a steep learning curve, and if you want to know the Kubernetes from scratch, you should have a way to build your own clusters so that you will have a feel of building each and every component of Kubernetes clusters by yourself. That's the first bit. And the second and the most important bit is it offers you a full sense of control on your Kubernetes clusters, meaning you can do whatever the possible options that Kubernetes as an open source product offers for their user. There are no limitations because this is not the end product that you are using, right? You have a source code, you have a complete authority to apply all sort of changes, all sort of upgrades, all sort of features to this Kubernetes clusters, which is not at all possible if you go with an ready-made offering which is in the market like Kubernetes, right? There are plenty of limitations to go with the Kubernetes because it is something that you can run on your local laptop. But in this case, we are executing this on a control environment which is there on AWS. So definitely it is offer plenty of features compared to your Kubernetes. EKS, Fargate, as I said, they are ready-made offering. So there are some sort of limitations. Some part of that Kubernetes cluster is managed by somebody else, and you only have a control with the bits which is in your hand, which is your Kubernetes node. But in this particular case, you have a control on Kubernetes control plane as well as you have a control on Kubernetes data plane. So there are full authority if you use this sort of a product to spin up your Kubernetes master. Now, where this sort of what are the standard use cases for this bootstrapping of a Kubernetes cluster, the way that we are going to see? It could be definitely useful for a Kubernetes learner, the person or the students, right, who wants to learn the Kubernetes from scratch. This is something what you should definitely go with because it is act as a starting point if you are a newbie to a Kubernetes. The second and most important is if you are aspiring to do a Kubernetes certifications, which is really trending in the market and it has huge value if you have a Kubernetes certifications on your curriculum, right? So again, if you want to do a Kubernetes certification, you need some sort of a basic platform where you can explore the knowledge, do the practical steps by yourself. So this is something which is useful for you. Third and the most important, to host a non-production workload, right? If you want to say if you are if you want to deploy some sort of a stateful or stateless non-productions or a pilot workload, you can make use of this Kubernetes cluster bootstrapping and help yourself. The fourth one is innovation platform. Definitely, if you want to try any sort of an new changes, right, a version upgrade, for example, Kubernetes platform version upgrade, any sort of a new service implementation which is there in Kubernetes, you can experiment those new features, those changing services with this Kubernetes platform, right, what we are gonna build now, and then apply those changes to your actual Kubernetes production live workloads, right? And the last one is capability demonstration platform. So if you want to demonstrate any sort of an application capability, right, that is on the Kubernetes, you can spin up the Kubernetes clusters the way we are going to see, deploy your applications and do the capability demonstrations, and then you can release those sort of features to your production Kubernetes environment. One note over here, this sort of Kubernetes cluster bootstrapping cannot be straight applied to a production workload. Okay, definitely there are some changes that has to be done, but the intention behind this bootstrapping is not to be applied over a production workload. This is only limited to to these use cases which I have just mentioned. Hope that is clear. Moving ahead to the next slide, which is prerequisites. Okay, so this sort of an session is not really for beginners, but it is not really for an expert people, right? So in these sessions, I'm gonna make sure that the newbies should also get some sort of an understanding of how to start with, as well as the experienced person should also get a feel of doing some real groundwork with the Kubernetes, AWS and Terraform. However, there are some prerequisites that has to be fulfilled. The first is in terms of competency wise, meaning that the person should have a basic level of understanding, okay, with what AWS and Terraform it all does. The reason I haven't mentioned Kubernetes over here is because this is just an starting point for a Kubernetes person. So once you have a cluster ready, then you can go with a sort of an theoretical concept of Kubernetes, and then you can start doing the practical of those Kubernetes concept with these clusters, right? So the bare minimum understanding is that the person should have a basic term level of understanding of what is Terraform and what is AWS is all about doing. The next prerequisite is about tools, right? Where we expect to have Terraform version 12. The link how to install and from where to install Terraform version 12 has been shared with the GitHub repository, which we will see as we move forward. Again, you should have an AWS account. This sort of a demonstration expect to have a free tier account, right? We do not require a AWS account where we have any sort of a subscription plan. No, that is not required. A free tier AWS account with a free tier eligible resources, we're gonna achieve this Kubernetes cluster bootstrapping, right? Third important thing is we need some sort of an software like PuTTY, and Pigeon. All these softwares are open source software. You do not have to pay a single penny in order to install those. The link to have this software has been shared into the GitHub repository, which we will going to see as we move forward. The last software requirement is Git Bash. Again, an open source freeware software which can be installed straightforward from the Google. The reason we need a Git Bash because we want to execute some sort of an Terraform CLIs, and which work better on a bash, Git Bash. If you are using a sort of an Windows laptop, then we recommend to have a Git Bash. If you are using a Mac, then you can straight execute this. You no longer require a Git Bash. You can straight execute this sort of an Terraform commands from your terminal. But if you are using the Windows laptops, we recommend to have Git Bash software installed. Again, a freeware software, few clicks of efforts to install it, and we are good to go. So this is more about prerequisites in terms of competencies as well as in terms of tools.